Creativity. What a beautiful word, full of unknown, innovative, and alive. But let me ask you, if I said, raise your hand if you're creative, would any of you actually do it? What does it even mean to be creative? Where does creativity come from? And more importantly, do you feel creative? Well, I didn't. No, when I was younger. I thought that creativity meant inventing something out of nothing. And I couldn't do that. I believed that creativity is something you either had or you didn't. And obviously, I wasn't among the chosen ones. Sure, I could draw somehow okay, but only if I had a reference, something to copy from. And most of my works look like this, copies. And in my head, that voice kept saying, this isn't creativity. So how does someone who wasn't born creative end up here telling you about creativity? Well, lately I came across a beautiful book from Rick Rubin called The Creative Act. After just a few lines, it all started to come together to me. I realized that creativity isn't only for the gifted ones. It's for everyone. And more than that, everyone is already a creator. Not just the painters, musicians, or the poets. Everyone who solves problems, makes decisions, and sees the world in their own way. That being said, what if all of us just started to consider ourselves artists? I know, it might sound strange, weird, maybe even a little uncomfortable. But it shouldn't, because after all, we're all creating all the time. We just don't call it art yet. A mother inventing bedtime rituals. That's choreography. A student finding a new way to solve a math problem. That's composing. A friend crafting the perfect message for someone going through hard times. Isn't that poetry? The world has simply convinced us that art needs to look a certain way. But what if it isn't only about writing or painting? What if it's about how you approach the world and how you engage with it? Now, the question isn't, am I creative? Now the question is, what made me stop from being creative? And how do I bring that part of me back? Well, it's not an easy question because, honestly, most of us didn't lose our creativity. We're taught to abandon it. Somewhere along the way, we learned to trade creativity for correctness, playfulness for productivity, and imagination for efficiency. So, before I tell you all the secrets and practical tools on how to become creative again, I'd like to share with you a concept on which they're all built on. What if creativity actually isn't about effort at all? What if it's about attention? I know that this might go against everything we've been told, but maybe ideas aren't invented out of nothing. Maybe creativity is about exploring something that's already there, waiting to be noticed. We might not just pull ideas out of thin air. Maybe they're just there, quietly knocking on the doors of our perception, waiting for us to unbolt the locks and let them in. Being still enough to hear them knocking. That might be your real key, because ideas rarely shout. They arrive quietly, like a whisper. And if you're too busy chasing them, you're likely going to miss them. That was a huge shift for me. Realizing I wasn't making ideas, I was receiving them. More like an antenna, picking up signals. And the less noise in my head, the clearer the signal becomes. There are works in the world that feel impossible, too powerful, or too timeless. Take Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, for example. He was completely deaf when he composed it. And still, he created one of the most emotionally moving and transcendent pieces of music in the history. How? Maybe it wasn't about hearing at all. Maybe it was about tuning into something beyond himself. Or think of Einstein. He didn't invent the laws of physics, he just saw them more clearly than anyone else. I mean, while most of us were just struggling with algebra, this guy was casually receiving the blueprint of the universe. Yeah, maybe that the idea was already waiting, and he just happened to be the one open enough to catch it. Some even say that if it wasn't for Einstein, someone else would discover relativity. And that might actually be true, because when an idea is ready to come into our world, it finds someone to bring it through. So, if creativity isn't a skill, but a state, now the question is, how do we enter that state more often? And before I go into it, I'd like you to keep in mind that this isn't only about making art. All those can be applied whether you're designing a business, writing a code, building a community, or simply navigating life in a more curious and open way. So, what if the best way to be creative is actually to do nothing at all? Finally, an excuse for lying on the couch and calling it a creative breakthrough. How often do you actually give yourself that space? Not to scroll, not to plan, just to sit in stillness and actually perceive the world around you. Most people would call it boring, right? But stillness is often where the most interesting things begin. Because when you're still, you start to notice things that are usually hidden by the noise. You start to notice clues. And those clues are everywhere. A dream you can't stop thinking about. A line you overheard on a tram that felt oddly specific. An object that caught your attention and you don't know why. All those are clues worth noticing. Try this. Open a random book at a random page and read the first line you see. It might surprise you. This actually happened to Rick Rubin, the author of the book. He was told by a doctor to undergo surgery to immediately remove his appendix. But later, when he went to a bookstore, he opened a random book at a random page, and the first line he read was, "If a doctor wants to remove a part of your body and says it has no function, don't believe this." Well, he took it as a sign, and years later, he still has his appendix. Being in stillness and noticing clues is one way to enter the creative state. But there is something else that makes a huge difference, and that's pressure. And more specifically, the absence of it. Because nothing kills creativity more than sitting in front of a blank paper and telling yourself, this needs to be amazing. Creativity doesn't respond to force. It responds to freedom. The moment you stop trying hard, something beautiful often sneaks in. Look, art is one of the things that are too important to be taken too seriously. And when you stop trying to make something perfect, you start to make something honest. So when you allow yourself to take the pressure off, you create space for play. And play is often where your creativity lives. Think about how children create. They follow what feels strange, fun, or exciting. And maybe that is the mindset we need to return to. Let's look at the creative process now. In the early stages of any creative process, play exactly what you need. Because in this stage, the goal is to generate freely, to gather sparks. That's how you collect what we can call seeds. Little fragments of ideas that might lead into something later. Those could be sentences, questions, melodies, business ideas, or problems we're solving. Once you've collected a handful of those, the next step is to explore them. Start one by one and see where it leads. Write about it, sketch it, talk to it, whatever helps you feel if there's life in it. This is the fun part. You're not building yet, you're just digging. Exploring each of the seeds will spark life in some of them, while others will simply fail to grow. The ones that breathe a little, you'll follow those, while the rest, you keep for another day. Once one idea has evolved and outshone the others, it's time to focus only on that one and bring it into a full-grown piece of art. The lines were drawn. Now, it's time to fill in the colors. This is usually the least exciting phase for most artists, because you don't need to shine with creativity or have your head up in the clouds. This time, you need to have your head down and preserved through the slow labor of bricklaying. It's not about inventing anymore. It's about polishing, shaping, and sometimes even fixing what's already there. Towards the end of a project, a moment will come when it feels like there's nothing more to add or nothing more to take away. Even if it doesn't seem perfect, this moment is enough. There's no need to chase perfection, because the primary goal of your work isn't to impress people or conquer the world. It simply is to express what your artistic core has to say. I'd like to shift the attention now from what I've said to what you might do next. Because I have a simple favor I'd love to ask you. On your way home or anytime soon, maybe even just now, try to notice one thing you've never noticed before. That's all. No pressure. Just look. Look at the world as you've never seen it before, as you've just landed there, and everything around you was brand new. That's all it takes to begin. So if you find yourself standing in line, walking across the campus, reaching for your phone, don't. Choose to explore instead. The world is full of clues, and if you're present enough, they'll find you. So let me ask you, wouldn't it be great to believe that you're creative? to believe that you have the ability to create great things, to truly believe that you're an artist, because creativity isn't something you do. It's something you are. Thank you for your attention.